Back in 2007, I was still living in Michigan, and I got a call from one of my friends who said, "Come and join me for a Detroit Tigers baseball game." Now, you know I love the Tigers, and so I accepted immediately, and then he shared the good news that he had been able to secure a luxury box, one of these really cool places where you go. And I got to the game, and I found my way to where we were, and I walked into this room, and it was amazing. There was this amazing lounge furniture everywhere and TVs all over the walls, so you could watch not just the Tigers, but all the other games going on. And there was this big bar for food. And so you could have all you could eat, all you could drink. It was all available. And then you could just walk out this glass door, and you were way up above the stadium. And looking down, you could see the game perfectly. It was amazing. So we're having a great time to watching the players warm up, eating the food, and all of a sudden, the door opens. And in walks my friend. And he has 3 guys with him. 2 of the guys I knew immediately. Now, they didn't know me, but I knew who they were. The other one, I didn't know who he was right away. I figured out his name was John Van Beesbrook. If you're a hockey person, he was a hockey goalie back in the 80s and the 90s. But the other 2 guys, I knew immediately. One of them was Ernie Harwell. You know who Ernie Harwell is? He was the longtime broadcaster for the Detroit Tigers. So when I was growing up, and at night I'd be laying in my bed, and I'd have my little transistor radio with a little earpiece in my ear so my parents wouldn't know, and I'd be listening to the Tigers. It was Ernie Harwell whose voice would put me to sleep every night, listening to him talk about the Tigers. And the other guy was Frank Tanana. Frank Tanana had been a pitcher for the Tigers in the 80s. My best memory of Frank Tanana is 1987. Tigers had a great team. They were in second place most of the season, and right down the stretch, they were a little bit behind the Blue Jays. And the last series of the season was in Detroit. The Blue Jays were coming to town, and the Blue Jays were in first, and the Tigers were in second, and the Tigers won every game. And on the last day of the season, Frank Tanana pitched. They won the game 1-0. He pitched the whole game, and the Tigers won the division. So that's my best memory of Frank Tanana. And the door opens, and there he is, and I knew immediately who he was. What started out as kind of a cool night turned into an amazing night, because I got to sit and watch a Tigers game with Ernie Harwell. How cool is that? He's talking to me about the game like I'm on the radio. And then on the other side is Frank Tanana, and I'm talking to him about, hey, tell me about Lou Whitaker, and tell me about Alan Trammell and Kirk Gibson and Lance Parrish, and what was it like to play with Jack Morris and all of these guys who were my boyhood heroes, and he was telling me all about them. You see, that night changed when those guys entered the room. But as great as it was when they entered the room, that was not the greatest entry in history, right? Sometimes somebody enters a room and everything changes. And the greatest entry in history happened when? 2,000 years ago, right? In a cold night in Bethlehem, when God became a man and entered our world. Now, I don't know how often you think about that. Think about that. God entered our world. John, who was one of Jesus' best friends, wrote about this. In fact, he opened his book, the Gospel of John. In John chapter 1, verse 14, John says, "The Word became flesh and dwelt among us." God put on human flesh. We have a word for this in theology. It's called the Incarnation. Incarnate means in flesh. See, if you say that you're a carnivore, what you're really saying is you eat flesh, right? And so carnate is flesh. So Jesus actually put on human flesh. He became like us. This is a big deal. Sometimes it's easy for us to think about the incarnation and have this idea that somehow we deserved it, right? We're humans. We are the best part of God's creation, right? He put us above the animals, above the plants. We're so great and we're so lovable. Well, of course God would want to come to earth and be with us, right? That's kind of ridiculous, isn't it? Why would God humble himself to become a person? And beyond that, when we think about God coming to earth, if God were to come to earth today, why do you think he would come? Now, some of us would say, man, if God comes back today, I hope it's to rescue me and get me off of this crazy planet, right? And some of us would say, actually, I'm afraid that if God came today, it would be for judgment. And we would all say, yeah, and we would deserve that, right? Because if we've demonstrated anything, it's that we don't know how to live together in God's creation. But Jesus didn't come for judgment. He could have, but he didn't. Jesus actually came, he entered our world to make it a better place. We know how he spent his time here. He spent his time healing people, the blind, the lame, the sick. He even raised the dead. And he made this world a better place with his teaching. Right? The Sermon on the Mount is probably the greatest piece of ethical literature ever. It teaches us how to have the perfect world. Jesus' teaching was everything we needed to learn how to make this world better. We just don't listen and don't obey. And Jesus made the world a better place by how he demonstrated love. Right? Because Jesus didn't come just for the important. He didn't come just for the wealthy or the powerful. He didn't come here for the people who could do things for him. In fact, Jesus spent his whole life around the poor and the oppressed. Jesus spent his life reaching out to the people that society had pushed away because Jesus came here to make this world a better place. And Jesus came here to be with us. He came here to have a relationship with his creation. He came here to demonstrate to us that he loved us. The Bible says that even while we were sinners, even while we were messed up, even while we were messing up his creation, God demonstrated his love for us in Jesus. So Jesus came to make the world a better place, and Jesus came to demonstrate his love for us, but more importantly, Jesus came to point us to God. You see, Jesus entered our world so that he could point us to God. If you keep reading in John chapter 1, he gets to verse 18, and it's kind of a tough verse to read because of the way John words it. But essentially what he says is, no one can know God. Now that's true. None of us can know God because we can't see him. We can't be with him. He's removed from us. Now there was a time. There was a time when we could know God. When God created Adam and Eve and placed them in the garden, he came and he walked with them and he talked with them. They had this incredible relationship. Adam and Eve knew God. They didn't know everything about him. They didn't completely understand everything about him, but they knew him. They had relationship. But then what happened? They sinned. And because of their sin, they were separated from God. And that separation lasts all the way to today. And so John says, no one can know God because we're separated from him. And then he says, but God, the one and only, and now he's talking about Jesus, has made him known to us. You see, Jesus came to make known to us what was lost. Jesus came to connect us to God, to actually be the connection to God. That's why he said to his disciples in John 14, he said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. It's through Jesus that we are reconnected to God. And we desperately need that. All of us are included in the group of people who have sinned. Right? Romans says that all have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. And that's true. Every single one of us has done something to make us fall short of God's standard. Now, we do good things too, right? Some of you probably helped a little old lady across the street this week. I, at one point, chose not to kick a cat, and that's a good thing. But all of us do bad things as well. Maybe it's the way we speak to one another. Maybe it's the way we act around one another. Maybe it's our attitude. Maybe it's the way we interact online. All of us are guilty, and because of our guilt, we're separated from God, and that's why Jesus came to point us back to him, to connect us back to him. You see, Jesus went to the cross so we wouldn't have to. Jesus gave up his life so that he could give us life. And when we turn our life over to him, he gives us his life in return. You see, I take my life, my broken, messed up, fallen short, sinful life, and I say, God, I'm not good enough to be connected to you. I'm not good enough to have a relationship with you, and so I'm trusting Jesus to do that for me. I'm claiming Jesus' work on the cross as having been done for me, and I'm accepting the gift of a restart in life from you. And here's what happens when I do that. When I give my life to Jesus, he gives me a pardon for my past. Everything I did in my past is forgiven. The people I've hurt, the words I've said that I shouldn't have said, my actions that didn't honor God, the thoughts I've had, the attitudes, all of it, it's forgiven. It's in my past. And often it's our past that holds us back, isn't it? It's the guilt and the shame of knowing that we've done wrong. And we can't get past that. And what I want you to understand this morning is that if God has forgiven you, then you can forgive yourself. Because you've been given a pardon for your past. But it's much more than that, what Jesus does for us. He also gives us a promise for the future. And man, this is powerful to me today, to think that there is a time and there is a place that's waiting for us where there will be no more sorrow, there will be no more death, there will be no more disease, there will be no more fighting, there will be no more anger, there will be no more war. All of the old will be gone. And we will live in a world that was created for us exactly as it's supposed to be. And we won't be able to mess it up this time. That's the future that Jesus has promised for us. That's our hope, where everything will be made right. So in Jesus, we have pardon for the past, we have a promise for the future, and he has a plan for the present. You see, this is what we're talking about today, is that Jesus didn't come just to point us to God and say, okay, that's done, now you're just going to sit around and wait. No, he's got something for us to do here. There's a reason we're still here and not with him. He has a plan for the present. What's Jesus' plan? Well, he gave it to the disciples right before he went back to the Father. We call it the Great Commission. It's in Matthew chapter 28. And in Matthew 28:19, what did Jesus say? He said, "Go therefore and make disciples of all nations." Go. And essentially what Jesus is saying is, I want you to do for others what I have done for you. You can imagine the scene in heaven just before Jesus came to earth. Christmas Eve in heaven, as it were. When God says to his son, go, it's time. And now in Matthew 28, Jesus repeats that command to us. And he says, go. He wants us to be his ambassadors. Let's talk about that word for just a second. So I'm back in Detroit, okay? And I'm in Detroit, and I'm talking to Frank Tanana, and I'm talking to Ernie Harwell, and I'm talking to John Van Beesbrook, and I realize these guys are here for a purpose, right? They're actually ambassadors. You see, my friend who set this whole thing up was actually the chaplain for the Detroit Tigers, and he had a ministry called Home Plate. It's this big event they do every year where they bring a lot of people in for a Tigers game, and then he brings guys like Frank Tanana in to speak, and they share the gospel with as many people as they can. And my friend's heart just beat for this ministry that he had. And so what he did is he gathered a bunch of pastors together, and he brought in some men to be ambassadors. And between the 7th and the 8th inning, we all stopped and we went inside, and Ernie Harwell and Frank Tanana talked to us about Home Plate. And they shared their passion for it. And we listened. And we heard what they had to say, and they represented it in such a way that we wanted to connect to this ministry, because that's what an ambassador does. An ambassador connects people who were previously unconnected. And if we're going to be ambassadors for Jesus, that's what we do also. We live in a way to connect people who were previously unconnected. So how do we do that? We do it the same way Jesus did. We enter the world of others so that we can point them to God. Okay? So it's not there yet, but it'll be there in just a second, I promise. There it is. We enter the world of others so that we can point them to God. Just like Jesus incarnated, he put on flesh, so we also are to incarnate, to put on the flesh of others, to enter the world of others, to get to know them. want you to think about this. To enter someone else's world means I have to leave mine. This is so important for us as Christians because there's this thing that we do. All right? We get saved, and we're excited about it. Jesus has saved me. This is great. And we start going to church, and that's fantastic. Or maybe we grow up in the church, and we slowly but surely begin to find this new world, the Christian world. And slowly but surely we live more and more of our lives there and less of our lives elsewhere. And statistics show that once someone's been a Christian for 5 years, they have almost zero friends who are not Christians. You see, they've left the world that Jesus wants them to enter. And I want to challenge us today. We want to be a church that is entering the world of others, not leaving the world of others. Jesus entered our world to save us, to connect us to God, and that's our calling also, to enter the world of people around us. Let me talk to you about what that means. All of us have what I call is a circle of influence, right? I can't change the world. I can't. I don't have enough influence, but I can change the world of people around me. I have circles of influence where I can enter people's world and make a difference. And there's 3 kinds of people in your circle of influence, all right? One type of people is people that you know about. Another type is people that you know, and then another type is people that know you. The people that you know about, those are the ones you've been socially distancing yourself from them forever, right? You don't really know them, but you know about them. Maybe you see them at work, you might even know their name, or you see them every so often out and about, or they're your neighbor, and you don't ever really talk, but you know something about them. And then there's people in your circle of influence who are the people that you know, right? If you see these people on the street, you're going to stop, you'll have a conversation, you talk a little bit, you know about their family, you might know where they work or what they enjoy doing, you just know them a little bit better. These are people you would say, yeah, I know that person. We have some kind of a relationship. And then there's the people who know about you. You know, it takes a lot to know about me, for me to open up and to share and let you know what makes me tick on the inside. But if you're someone who knows about me, then you're my friend, right? And the people who know about you, those are the people you call friend. They're the people you might have over to your house, the people you might go out to eat with. They're the people you call when you really need help with something. And all of these people are the people whose lives we ought to be entering to point them to God. Because hopefully in all of our circles of influence, there are people who don't know God. And if there aren't, what does that mean? That means I need to expand my circle of influence. You see, one of the roles is to enter people's circles of influence, but the other is to expand my circles of influence. Matt, can we go back to that Matthew 28 slide just for a second? I know I'm kind of throwing them off here, but I want you to look and see what this says. It says, "Go therefore and make disciples of who? All nations." Not a few, not some, not your nation, but go and make disciples of all nations. You know what this means? Jesus is saying, I want you to enter the world of everybody that you can. I want you to enter the world of people who aren't like you. People who look differently than you. People who talk differently than you. People who think differently than you. People who vote differently than you. I want you to enter their world. I want you to get to know them. I want you to connect with them. Learn what makes them tick. Learn what they love. Learn what scares them. Learn what trials they've been through. Learn what gets them up in the morning and gets them excited. Enter their world. Because guess what? The people who don't look like you, the people who don't talk like you, the people who don't think like you, the people who don't vote like you, Jesus loves them too. And they need to know Jesus as much as you do. And so our calling is to go to all nations. And that's why our habit number 6 is incarnate. Take on flesh. Enter the world. This is what I'm saying our habit ought to be. Intentionally connect with people in my circles of influence at least 3 times per month. Now, this first word is actually pretty important. This needs to be intentional. This can't be something I just kind of, well, maybe it'll happen, maybe it won't. Because if we take that mindset, we'll just keep connecting with the people we know. We'll just keep connecting with the people around us, the people who have already found Jesus. And what I'm saying is we need to make a plan. I need to ask myself, who are 3 people I know whose world I could enter into? Who are 3 people I know whose world I could make better? Who are 3 people I know that I could have a conversation with? And I need to intentionally find a way to enter their world. I need to make a plan and then do it. Now you might be saying, okay, David, that sounds great. Specifically, let's get practical. How do I do this? Let me give you 5 ideas, okay? 5 quick ideas on how you can enter the world of people around you. Number 1, it's really obvious, have a conversation, okay? And maybe this means you walk across the driveway to your neighbor or across the street to your neighbor, or maybe it means you go to the next cubicle over of a coworker, or maybe it just means you walk up to somebody on the street, but you have a conversation. And a conversation, if you're not sure how this works, means you talk and you listen. And I would suggest maybe listening more than you talk. Get to know them. Find out who they are. Have a conversation. This is the simple one, right? Here's another idea you can have is host a party, right? Have a bunch of people over to your house or have a grill out party or do whatever it is that you want to do, but bring people together so they can all begin to enter into each other's world. Have a party. Call up some friends and say, hey, I'm having a party, and then call up some neighbors and say, hey, I'm having a party. Everybody come on over and get to know each other. It's always easier to get to know someone over food, isn't it? So have a party, have food, and get to know people. Here's another idea. Attend an event together. Hey, let's go to a football game. Let's go to the high school game this week. Hey, let's go down to Cincinnati, catch a baseball game or a soccer game or whatever you want to catch. Let's go downtown and watch a show. All right, hey, I heard this great event is happening. Let's go to the Bacon Festival. Is the Bacon Festival going to happen this year? Oh, that is sad. When the festivals come back, go to the festivals, right? Attend an event together. Because here's the thing. When you're having fun with someone, you get to know them. And as you get to know them, they begin to trust you. And as they begin to trust you, they want what you have, and they're going to want you to point them to Jesus. So attend an event together. Or meet a need, right? The more you get to know someone, the more you understand what their needs are. And this is a little bit what we talked about last week with salt and light, is that part of why God has us here is to make this world a better place. And so as you get to know more people and understand what their needs are, ask yourself, how can I use what God has given me to meet these needs? How can I use the resources or the gifts that God has provided to meet the needs of the people around me? Can I enter their world that way? Isn't that exactly what Jesus did? He came and he met people's needs. He healed them. He loved them. He pointed them to a better way of life. And as a result, they listened to him. One other thing you can do, and this sounds counterintuitive, but ask for help. Do a project together. Benjamin Franklin had a principle that it's now called the Franklin principle. Makes sense, right? And his idea was that when you ask someone to help you, it actually bonds them to you in a unique way. These are his words. He said, he that has once done you a kindness will be more ready to do you another than he whom you yourself have obliged. In other words, when you ask someone to help you, they want to help you again. So maybe you say, hey, friend, we're getting to know each other. I'm doing this project this week. I'm building a fence in my backyard. I could use an extra pair of hands. Would you mind coming to help me? Do you know what happens when you do that? You're making yourself vulnerable. You're saying, I'm not perfect. I can't do it by myself. I need help. And you're saying to them, you are the solution to my problem, which makes them feel pretty good. Sometimes the most powerful way to enter someone else's world is to ask them to help you. I know, you have to humble yourself to do that, right? Well, I don't even hardly know my neighbor. I can't ask them to come over and build a fence with me. Sure you can. And you know what? They might love to do that. Or say, hey, friend, me and a couple others are going down to St. Vincent's this weekend to serve some food. Would you like to come with us? You give them an opportunity to serve alongside you. And now you're doing something meaningful together. And you're sharing life. And that's the point of all of this, is to share your life with people around you. Because Jesus shared his life with you. So this is our challenge for the week. Intentionally, make a plan. Intentionally connect with people in my circles of influence. So maybe this is people who know me. Maybe this is people who I know. Or maybe this is people who I just know about and I want to get to know them better. But I'm going to make a plan to intentionally connect with them at least 3 times per month. Now, some of you have the spiritual gift of connection. And you can probably do this 30 or 31 times a month because you do it every day. And some of you do not have the spiritual gift of connection, and this is hard. But remember that when Jesus gave the Great Commission, when he said, go and make disciples of all nations, he finished by saying, and I will be with you always. So you can do this. Jesus came to earth. Jesus entered our world. And he did it to make it a better place. So what can we do this week to make the world around us a better place? The answer is different for all of us because God has given different gifts to all of us. But there is an answer for every one of us. And Jesus entered our world to point us to God. So what can I do this week to enter the world of people around me and point them to God? Next week we're going to get to our last habit. And our last habit is very closely tied with this one. It's invite. And we're going to talk about how the two work hand in hand, to incarnate and invite, to enter the world and then invite them to know Jesus. So I hope you come back for kind of part 2 of this week. But let me pray for you right now, okay? Father, thank you so much for all that you've done for us. Thank you most for sending Jesus to do for us what we could never do for ourselves. Father, I pray that every single one of us would let that be our inspiration and let Jesus' sacrifice be our motivation to go out and enter this world that you've placed us in so that we can change it for you, so that we can point people back to you. Thank you for giving us the privilege of being your representatives. Help us to take that privilege and that responsibility seriously. Father, I pray for my friends this week as they go out into the world that you would give them your eyes and your heart as they encounter the people around them. In your name, amen.